Well, you might want to add this to your vocabulary. A new term has been coined connected to the rising cost of everything. It's called Tip-flation, and you probably know what that means: increasing gratuities for services in places like restaurants. Now, in a recent study, almost half of Canadians who were served at restaurants said their tips are higher compared to before the pandemic. Suggested tips on credit card machines, for example, are also climbing. They're now asking for 18, 20, and 25%. And CBC News has found at least one restaurant that is asking for 30% in tips. So to talk a little bit more about this, I want to welcome Katie Ingram. She's the owner of Fleisch Delicatessen in Edmonton. Thank you so much for joining us, Katie.
Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about this for a moment. What are you seeing at your restaurant? Are tips going up in terms of what people are giving and what you might be asking for?
Mm-hmm. I think that there's a number of issues at play. So tips, I think, are going up because people are generally used to tipping on what the total bill is. And so because those total bills have been going up, and up, because pricing has been affected with inflation, I think that's one factor. I do think that, especially in small local establishments with a dedicated following, that people have been more generous throughout the last 2.5 years, if they're able to, because they don't want to see these places disappear, or they have a connection to the staff, and they're rewarding or giving that money to staff as we know you've had this hardship for these last 2.5 years. So I think there's a few issues like that at play with this tipflation.
So what do you make then of certain restaurants, and I'm not sure whether or not this applies to your deli, that are actually changing the way that you can select different options, for example, on either a debit or credit card machine, where it will ask you for specific options. And in some cases, you heard CBC News found one restaurant saying 30%. So what do you make of that move? Is that something that is fair to so many Canadians and really people around the world who are also dealing with the tightening of their own budgets, asking them to dig deeper into their pockets?
Right. I think the interesting thing here is that this is coming at a time where we're hearing about the labor shortage as well. And the labor shortage is definitely hitting the hospitality industry very, very hard. And so I think as a consumer, what I would want to know is, where is that tip actually going? So are those tips being increased on the machine and going straight into the owner's pocket to help with their bills? Or is that going to the person that gave you the service that you believe that you're tipping for? And in some cases, that is not the case. And so as a consumer, and as someone who's tightening their belt and wanting to know where every dollar goes, that's really what you'd want to know. I think that some business owners are using increased tipping as a way to increase wages and attract workers. And some are really using it as a way to recoup some of their losses for the last 2.5 years. And so my recommendation to consumers would be to be more conscious of where that money is going and to ask better questions.
And so to your point then, do you think we need a collective rethink when it comes to the labor force that works in restaurants and bars, how they're compensated, what's being asked of consumers? What do you think needs to change there?
What a great question. And I don't have all the answers, but I think asking that question and really recognizing that the last 2.5 years blew the doors off of every industry, but specifically hospitality, and a lot of the cracks that exist and the precariousness of the work. And so I think that rethinking how people are compensated in hospitality and how people are treated and what the work actually looks like is going to be very important. And I think the consumer is definitely part of that. So right now, when you're given the option of 30% on a debit machine, that is still in your hands. That is still, at your discretion. Their wages are potentially at your discretion at that point. So if it were something to say that, as a collective, we're no longer okay with the way that hospitality professionals are compensated or treated, or their work conditions. And so we're all going to agree to, say, a service charge of 20% on our bills. And we know that that's going to go towards paying a living wage, paying benefits, that type of thing. And now that's something that's no longer in your control. Is that something as a consumer that you're going to be okay with because you understand the value for the hospitality professional? So these are really good questions to be asking, and it's certainly something that needs to change.